I was born in Allentown, Pennsylvania, but at just 2 years old, my life took a turn that would shape me into the person I am today. My family moved to Romania, where both my parents were born and raised. They wanted me to grow up immersed in their culture, surrounded by our traditions, our language, and our identity. My grandparents don't speak a word of English, and my parents still carry strong Romanian accents to this day. So naturally, Romanian became my first language. But a year later, at age 3, we moved back to the US, and that's when everything changed for me. At this age, I didn't understand what a language barrier was, but I felt it. I felt it every time I tried to speak. Certain sounds didn't come out naturally to me. For example, the TH, the sound, came out as more of a f or a t. At that age, words didn't flow the way they were supposed to. And while I didn't fully understand why, I did understand one thing. Other kids left. Now, I was never embarrassed, not really, but I did feel different. I remember being placed in ESL classes through the 2nd grade, and honestly, I loved it. Not just because it was easier, but because it felt like home. I was surrounded by kids that were just like me, kids that were unfamiliar with the language around them, but somehow understood each other perfectly. We didn't need perfect English. We communicated through laughter, through gestures, through shared experiences. I remember connecting with kids from Asian, Indian, and Hispanic backgrounds over things like Hot Wheels and Power Rangers. We didn't speak the same language, but we connected anyway. And eventually, I learned. I was taken out of ESL. I adapted, and I grew. Over time, I fell in love with the English language, its structure, its complexity, its power. That same kid who struggled to pronounce the word 3 became someone who really loved writing and public speaking. But even as I grew, I never forgot what it meant to not be understood. In October of 2023, I lost someone who changed my life. My favorite elementary school teacher passed away after a year-long battle with cancer. She was the same teacher who believed in me before I believed in myself. She was the same teacher who looked at a young Romanian boy who struggled with his English and saw potential. Because of her, I called myself a 2-time published author. Because of her, I won a NaNoWriMo Award at Columbia University, as shown here. Because of her, I found my voice. And when she passed, I felt something I had never felt before, loss that I couldn't just push through. So I asked myself a question: what can I do to carry her impact forward? And suddenly, something resurfaced in my mind, something I hadn't thought about in years. That feeling of not being understood, the idea of language barriers. That experience of struggling to communicate came to mind. And that's when I decided to start a nonprofit. Not just any nonprofit, but one specifically targeting deaf children in Jamaica. At first, it seemed like an entirely different issue. After all, I struggle with language. These kids struggle with something different. Communication barrier rooted not just in language, but in accessibility. The children we support attend the Jamaica Christian School for the deaf. Many of them don't have access to the same educational opportunities as hearing students do. Through our nonprofit, we help fund teacher salaries and provide resources to these children to improve their education. And in March of 2026, everything became real. I took a week-long trip to Montego Bay, Jamaica, where I thought I was going there to help the students. But in reality, they were helping me. There's a moment from that trip I'll never forget. One of the directors of the school, Dr. Vickers Morgan, said something that stuck with me. Communication is not spread through just word of mouth. It is conveyed through hands, through feet, through community, and through love. And in that moment, everything for me clicked, because I had gone into that experience thinking I understood communication. I thought communication meant speaking clearly. I thought having a voice meant being heard, but I was wrong. There was a point during that trip where I was confronted with something very difficult. I remember thinking I was placed in that position to give kids that don't have a voice. But they didn't lack a voice. That I soon came to realize. I realized that I lacked understanding. Voice is not about speaking. Voice is about being understood. And that realization changed everything for me. Because as a society, we often equate communication with words. We assume that if someone can't speak our language, the burden is on them to adapt. But what if that assumption is wrong? As hearing individuals, we have the privilege of learning new languages. We can study Spanish, French, Romanian. We can adapt to the world around us. But for many in the deaf community, that option simply doesn't exist. They can't simply learn English and suddenly integrate into a hearing world. So the question becomes, why is the responsibility always placed on them? Before my trip, I had zero experience speaking sign language. The only thing I had was communicating through gestures in my ESL classes. But in Jamaica, I began to see something incredible. I saw conversations without sound. I saw laughter without words. I saw connection without a spoken language. And I realized sign language is not a limitation. It's a different kind of beauty. Now, some people might ask, why can't we just use writing to communicate with the deaf community? I used to think that too, but it's really not that simple. For example, languages like American Sign Language or Jamaican Sign Language are not direct translations of those respective languages. They have different structures, different grammar, different ways of expressing ideas. For example, the sentence which I began my speech with, how are you, might simply be cut to how you. To someone fluent in English, that might seem incomplete, but someone using sign language, perfectly clear. Because communication isn't about perfect grammar. It's about understanding. And that's the problem. When communication becomes difficult, when it requires effort, we often stop trying. We see a barrier, and instead of walking towards it, we turn away from it. What I've learned through my life is this: the most meaningful connections happen when we choose to try anyway. As a child, I learned how to communicate without perfect language. In Jamaica, I relearned that lesson in a completely different way. And now I carry a new responsibility, not just to speak, but to understand. Not just to be heard, but to listen. So I want to leave you all with this. The next time you encounter a language barrier, don't step back, lean in. Whether it's someone who struggles with communication, someone who doesn't know what their voice is, someone who doesn't speak at all, make that effort. Because in the end, the most powerful voices are not the loudest. They're the ones we choose to understand. Thank you.